Jasmine Carter stared at the champagne dripping down her pristine uniform as the first-class passengers laughed. Little did they know, she wasn't just any flight attendant. Tomorrow, she'd be sitting in her father's boardroom deciding their fate as Aero Elite's new CEO. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button right now if you've ever witnessed discrimination, and subscribe to see more stories of justice being served. Now let's see how these arrogant passengers learned their lesson in the most unexpected way. The morning had started like any other for Jasmine Carter. At 32, she stood before the mirror in her modest apartment, adjusting her Aero Elite Airways uniform with practiced precision. The navy blue blazer fit perfectly against her slender frame, gold buttons gleaming under the bathroom lights. She secured her curly hair into a neat bun, professional and unassuming, exactly as she wanted to appear. What passengers aboard Aero Elite's premium transcontinental flight from New York to Los Angeles wouldn't know was that Jasmine Carter possessed an MBA from Harvard Business School, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had worked at top consulting firms before joining her father's airline. Most importantly, they wouldn't know that Victor Carter, the self-made billionaire founder of Aero Elite Airways, was her father. Last day undercover, Jasmine murmured to herself, applying a modest coat of lipstick. Make it count. For the past 18 months, Jasmine had worked as a flight attendant, learning the airline business from the ground up. It had been her idea, one that her father initially resisted but eventually embraced. "You can't lead what you don't understand," she had told him, echoing his own words from her childhood. Victor had built his empire from nothing, becoming one of the few black airline owners in America, and he hadn't done it from an ivory tower. Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Board meeting tomorrow at 10. You ready to shock the world?" She smiled at the message. Tomorrow, Victor would announce her as his successor, the new CEO of Aero Elite Airways. After years of preparation, months of undercover work, and a lifetime of being Victor Carter's daughter, she would finally step into the light. The intercom in her apartment buzzed. Her ride to JFK was waiting. Jasmine grabbed her small carry-on suitcase and took one last look at her reflection. Tomorrow, she would trade this uniform for designer suits and boardroom battles. But today, she was still Flight Attendant Carter, cabin crew on Flight AE490. At the airport, Jasmine moved through employee security, greeting coworkers with warm familiarity. Only a handful of people knew her true identity: her direct supervisor, the chief pilot, and 2 trusted flight attendants who had become friends during her tenure. "Ready for your grand finale?" Michael Dawson, her closest ally among the crew, asked as they prepared the first-class cabin. At 28, Michael had been with Aero Elite for 6 years and had become Jasmine's confidant after she trusted him with her secret 3 months into her undercover role. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jasmine replied, arranging crystal champagne, flutes on a silver tray. "Just hoping for a smooth flight with no drama," Michael snorted. "In first class? With the passenger manifest we have today? Good luck with that." He nodded discreetly toward the manifest list. Jasmine's eyes scanned the names, stopping at 2 in particular: Blake Whitfield and Tristan Montgomery. She recognized both names immediately. Blake was the CEO of Meridian Investments, a major shareholder in several of Aero Elite's competitors. Tristan was his right-hand man and notorious for his cutthroat business tactics. "Great," Jasmine muttered. "Just what I needed. On my last day." "Look at it this way," Michael offered. "At least you'll get some intelligence on the competition before tomorrow." Victor's health had been deteriorating over the past year, accelerating the timeline for transition. At 67, he had built Aero Elite from a regional carrier into a luxury airline that competed with the biggest names in the industry. His announcement tomorrow wasn't just about securing his legacy. It was about ensuring the company's future before his health forced him to step down entirely. The first-class passengers began boarding an hour later. Jasmine greeted each with a professional smile, offering pre-flight champagne and hot towels. Blake Whitfield and Tristan Montgomery were among the last to board, engaged in intense conversation as they approached their seats. "Welcome aboard, gentlemen," Jasmine said, offering champagne. Blake barely glanced at her, taking the glass without acknowledgement. Tristan at least nodded, but his eyes never quite met hers, looking past her as though she were merely a service fixture rather than a person. "Is Mr. Reynolds flying today?" Blake asked, referring to Captain James Reynolds, the chief pilot who was indeed commanding today's flight. "Yes, sir. Captain Reynolds is in command today," Jasmine confirmed. "Good. I know Jim from the club. Real aviator, that man," Blake said to Tristan, ignoring Jasmine completely. "Not like some of these diversity hires they're pushing through aviation school these days." Tristan chuckled, and Jasmine felt the familiar twist in her stomach, the subtle burn of anger carefully controlled. She'd heard comments like this throughout her career, each one a small cut that never seemed to fully heal before the next one came. "Can I get you anything else before takeoff, gentlemen?" she asked, her professional demeanor unwavering. "This champagne is too warm," Blake said, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Don't you people know Dom Perignon should be served at 38 degrees? The "you people" hung in the air between them, ambiguous enough to deny but clear enough in intent. Jasmine had heard it too many times to misinterpret. "I apologize, sir. I'll bring you a properly chilled glass right away," she said, taking back the glass. As she turned to the galley, she overheard Tristan mutter, "Affirmative action at 30,000 feet, followed by Blake's muffled laughter. In the privacy of the galley, Jasmine took a deep breath. Tomorrow, these men would learn who she really was. Tomorrow, everything would change. But today, she was still Flight Attendant Carter, and she had a job to do. The remaining first-class passengers settled in, including a woman who caught Jasmine's attention. Sophia Martinez, according to the manifest, a marketing executive for a major tech company. Unlike the others, Sophia made eye contact, smiled genuinely, and thanked Jasmine by name after reading her badge. As the boarding process completed and they prepared for departure, Jasmine couldn't help but notice how the luxury of the first-class cabin seemed to amplify certain passengers' sense of entitlement. The handcrafted leather seats that converted into fully flat beds, the premium noise-canceling headphones, the personal service, all designed to create an exceptional experience, yet sometimes seeming to bring out the worst in people. "Captain," Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, announcing their imminent departure. As Jasmine secured the cabin for takeoff, she caught Blake staring at her with a look of mild disdain as she passed, then turning to whisper something to Tristan that made both men smirk. Jasmine thought of her father's words from years ago. "In this world, you'll have to be twice as good to get half as far. But remember, dignity isn't given or taken, it's maintained." As the massive engines roared to life and the aircraft began to taxi, Jasmine felt an odd symmetry to the moment. Her journey in disguise was ending just as this flight was beginning. By tomorrow, everything would change. She just had to make it through these next 6 hours. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner climbed steadily through wispy clouds, leaving the Manhattan skyline behind. Inside the first-class cabin, Jasmine moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the initial service once they reached cruising altitude. The soft ping of the captain turning off the seatbelt sign was her cue. "Would you care for another glass of champagne, Mr. Whitfield?" Jasmine asked, approaching Blake's seat with a fresh bottle properly chilled to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. "About time," he muttered, extending his glass without looking up from his tablet. "Make sure it's poured correctly this time." Jasmine maintained her professional smile, filling the crystal flute with precision. 6 years at a luxury hotel chain before business school had perfected her service skills, though she doubted Blake would appreciate or even notice the technique. As the service continued, Blake and Tristan grew increasingly vocal. 2 glasses of champagne became 4, then they switched to scotch. Their voices rose with their alcohol consumption, heedless of the other passengers around them. "I told him, you can't put those people in leadership positions and expect the same results," Blake said to Tristan, loud enough that several passengers glanced over uncomfortably. "It's just science, not prejudice. Some people are built for service, others for leadership." Tristan nodded enthusiastically. "The whole DEI thing is killing American business. My cousin lost a promotion to a black woman last year, 20 years. Experience versus her 5, but she checked more diversity boxes." Jasmine, arranging appetizers in the galley, felt her hand tighten around the serving tongs. The familiar knot formed in her stomach, the one she'd felt countless times throughout her career. At Princeton undergrad, classmates had assumed she was there on scholarship rather than merit. At Harvard Business School, a professor had repeatedly confused her with the only other black woman in class, despite them looking nothing alike. At McKinsey, clients had mistaken her for an assistant rather than their consultant. "Everything okay?" Michael asked quietly, noticing her expression. "Just the usual," Jasmine replied, forcing her focus back to the task at hand. "Nothing I haven't heard before." "Those guys are real pieces of work," Michael said, nodding toward Blake and Tristan. "Been trying to get another attendant to serve them, but everyone's strategically avoiding that section." "I've got it," Jasmine assured him. "Last day, remember? Nothing can touch me." As she returned to the cabin with appetizer selections, she couldn't help but overhear more of Blake and Tristan's conversation. "Victor Carter's getting too old to run that airline anyway," Blake was saying, unaware of the significance his words held for the woman serving him prosciutto-wrapped figs. "Word is he's naming a successor tomorrow, probably some diversity hire to make the press happy." Speaking of Carter, Tristan lowered his voice slightly, though not enough. "Have you made progress on that acquisition strategy?" "Working on it," Blake replied, accepting the appetizer without acknowledgement. "Once we get a board seat, we can start pushing from the inside. The old man's health is failing. Perfect time to make our move." Jasmine felt a chill run through her. These men weren't just unpleasant passengers. They were actively plotting against her father's company. Her company, as of tomorrow. A memory surfaced from her childhood, sitting on her father's lap in his home office as he explained why some people might treat them differently. "Some folks will never see past the color of our skin, Jazzy," he'd said gently. "But that's their loss. We don't need to carry their ignorance as our burden." Returning to the galley, Jasmine checked her phone briefly, finding a message from her father's assistant. "Mr. C asked about your flight. All set for tomorrow's announcement. Press conference scheduled for 2 p.m. after board meeting." The reality of tomorrow's event settled on her shoulders. In less than 24 hours, she would be responsible for thousands of employees, billions in assets, and her father's legacy. The weight of it momentarily overwhelmed the sting of Blake and Tristan's comments. As she prepared the main course service, Sophia Martinez approached the galley, requesting a glass of water. "Those men are being incredibly inappropriate," Sophia said quietly, nodding toward Blake and Tristan. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that." "Thank you, but it's part of the job," Jasmine replied diplomatically. "It shouldn't be," Sophia insisted. "I've worked in corporate America long enough to recognize that type. Men who think their success comes from superiority rather than privilege." Jasmine appreciated the solidarity but maintained her professional distance. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Martinez?" "Just the water is fine," Sophia said, then added, "and maybe karma for those two." Jasmine smiled genuinely for the first time that flight. Karma might be coming sooner than anyone expects. Returning to the cabin with the main course options, Jasmine approached Blake and Tristan's seats just as Blake was saying, "Carter's daughter is supposed to be smart, but what does she know about running an airline? Another case of nepotism masked as progressive leadership. At least she'll look good in the company photos," Tristan added with a smirk. "Diversity points and eye candy in one package." Something inside Jasmine snapped, not visibly, but a fundamental shift occurred. The champagne bottle she was holding tilted slightly as the aircraft encountered light turbulence. Golden liquid splashed across Blake's crisp white shirt and designer tie. "What the hell?" Blake exclaimed, jumping up as the cold champagne soaked through to his skin. "I am so sorry, sir," Jasmine apologized immediately, grabbing napkins to offer. The turbulence. "Turbulence my ass," Blake spat, his face contorted with anger. "You did that on purpose." "I assure you, sir, it was an accident," Jasmine said, maintaining her composure even as other passengers turned to watch the commotion. "Look what you've done to my Brioni tie. This costs more than you make in a month," Blake fumed, snatching the napkins from her hand. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Incompetence has consequences." The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet as all eyes focused on the unfolding scene. Jasmine stood perfectly still, aware that her response in this moment mattered more than the incident itself. "I apologize again, sir. I'd be happy to have the airline compensate you for any cleaning costs," she offered, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. "I don't want compensation from your pathetic salary," Blake sneered. "I want competent service on a first-class ticket that costs $20,000. Tristan leaned forward, adding with false concern, "Maybe this line of work isn't for everyone. There are probably other jobs better suited to your capabilities." The implication hung in the air, clear to everyone within earshot. Sofia Martinez, seated across the aisle, visibly tensed at the comment. Just then, the aircraft encountered more substantial turbulence, causing everyone to grab for stability. The momentary distraction gave Jasmine the chance to retreat to the galley, where she took several deep breaths to center herself. "What happened?" Michael asked, concern evident in his eyes. "Champagne accident?" Jasmine replied tersely. "Nothing I can't handle." But as she looked down, she noticed her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of containing her anger. Tomorrow she would have the power to affect these men's futures. Today, she was still subject to their casual cruelty. The irony wasn't lost on her. In less than a day, the power dynamic would completely reverse. The question was, what would she do with that power when the time came? As the flight continued westward, the tension in first class remained palpable. Blake and Tristan's behavior had crossed a line that even wealth and privilege couldn't entirely excuse. Jasmine felt the weight of every minute passing, each one bringing her closer to tomorrow's revelation and further testing her resolve to maintain her cover until then. The air pocket that had caused the turbulence seemed an apt metaphor for the emotional turbulence now churning inside her. Just like the aircraft had momentarily dropped before regaining its steady course, Jasmine would need to navigate this unexpected plunge before rising to her rightful place at Aero Elite's helm. Did you see how those first-class passengers treated Jasmine? Comment number 1 if you think Blake crossed the line with his racist behavior, or number 2 if you believe Jasmine should have revealed her true identity right then and there. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're excited to see these entitled passengers get what's coming to them. What do you think will happen when Jasmine reaches her breaking point? Let's find out. The galley became Jasmine's sanctuary as she pressed a cold towel to her wrists, a technique she'd learned years ago to calm herself during stressful situations. The champagne incident had left more than just stains on Blake's expensive shirt. It had cracked her carefully maintained professional veneer. "You should report them," Michael urged, keeping his voice low as he prepared coffee service. "That was straight-up harassment. Even first-class tickets don't buy the right to treat crew like that." Jasmine shook her head. "Less than 24 hours, Michael. I just need to get through this flight." "Being the boss's daughter doesn't mean you have to take abuse," he countered. "It's not about being Victor's daughter," Jasmine replied. "It's about being professional until the very end of this experiment." Her mind flashed back to similar incidents throughout her career. The investment banker who'd asked her to fetch coffee during her presentation at McKinsey, assuming she was an assistant. The client who'd questioned her analysis, only to accept the exact same information when presented by her white male colleague. The professor who'd suggested her Harvard admission might have been influenced by other factors besides merit. Each time, she'd responded with composure and excellence, letting her work speak for itself. It was exhausting, this constant need to be beyond reproach, but it had also forged her into someone capable of handling whatever challenges awaited in the C-suite. Her thoughts were interrupted when the cabin supervisor appeared in the galley doorway. "Jasmine, the gentlemen in 3A and 3B are asking to speak with a supervisor about the service," she said, her expression sympathetic. "I can handle it if you'd prefer." "No, I'll go," Jasmine said, straightening her uniform. "It's my section." She returned to the cabin, where Blake and Tristan sat with expressions of practiced indignation, like performance artists preparing for their cue. "Gentlemen, I understand you wanted to speak with someone about the service?" Jasmine inquired, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Are you the supervisor?" Blake asked skeptically, looking her up and down. "I'm the cabin service director for first class on this flight," Jasmine replied. A slight exaggeration, but not technically untrue given her dual role. "Well, your service has been completely unacceptable," Blake declared loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. First, the warm champagne, then spilling it deliberately, and now the slow response time. "I apologize for any shortcomings in our service today," Jasmine said evenly. "I assure you the spill was accidental due to turbulence, but I understand your frustration." "Do you?" Tristan interjected. "Because from where we're sitting, it seems like you're simply not qualified for this position. What are your credentials exactly?" The question, loaded with condescension, hung in the air. Jasmine had to bite back the urge to list her actual qualifications. Summa cum laude from Princeton, Harvard MBA, 6 years at McKinsey, fluency in 4 languages. "I've been with Aero Elite for several years and have completed all required training and certifications," she answered instead, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. Blake scoffed. "Several years serving drinks qualifies you to supervise? This is exactly what's wrong with corporate America today. Standards lowered to accommodate diversity." The way he said diversity made it sound like a disease rather than a strength. From across the aisle, Sofia Martinez visibly bristled at his tone. "Perhaps you'd prefer to speak with our chief purser or the captain," Jasmine offered, maintaining her composure. "The captain?" "Yes, I think that's appropriate," Blake said smugly. "I know James Reynolds personally. We're members at the same club in Manhattan. I'm sure he'll be interested to hear about the deteriorating service standards on his flights." "I'll see if Captain Reynolds is available to speak with you," Jasmine replied, though she knew James was well aware of her true identity and would back her completely. As she turned to leave, Blake added, "And I'll be speaking directly with Victor Carter about this incident. We have a board meeting tomorrow, and service quality is definitely on my agenda now." Jasmine froze momentarily, the irony of his threat not lost on her. "I'll be sure to note your concerns for Mr. Carter's attention," she managed to say before, retreating to the cockpit. Knocking on the cockpit door, she waited for the security protocol to complete before entering. Captain James Reynolds, a 20-year veteran of Aero Elite and one of her father's most trusted employees, looked up from his instruments. "Trouble in paradise?" he asked, noting her expression. "Blake Whitfield is throwing his weight around, threatening to talk to my father about me," Jasmine explained, the absurdity of the situation finally breaking through her stress and eliciting a small laugh. "Want me to go back there and set him straight?" James offered. "It would be worth it just to see his face when he realizes who he's been harassing." "Tempting, but no," Jasmine replied. "He mentioned knowing you from some club, though," James snorted. "I've met him exactly once at a charity event. He's the type who claims connections he doesn't have. What's he really doing on this flight, I wonder? The timing seems suspicious with tomorrow's announcement." Jasmine nodded. "He mentioned something about an acquisition strategy and getting a board seat. I think they're planning some kind of move against Aero Elite." "Not surprising," James said. "Your father's made a lot of enemies by refusing to play their games. Men like Whitfield can't stand seeing someone like Victor succeed on his own terms." A call from the cabin interrupted their conversation. "I should get back," Jasmine said. "If he asks to speak with you, I'll be appropriately professional," James promised with a wink. "But maybe we hit some turbulence right when he comes. Up front, make him spill something on himself for a change." Returning to the cabin, Jasmine found Blake on his phone, his voice carrying despite his attempt at discretion. "Listen, I need you to find everything you can on Aero Elite's new CEO announcement. Tomorrow," he was saying. "The rumor is it's Carter's daughter, but I need leverage. Harvard MBA or not, she can't possibly have the experience to run an airline. Find me something we can use." Jasmine felt a chill run down her spine. They were actively digging for dirt on her, preparing to undermine her before she'd even officially started. As she passed Blake's seat, he abruptly ended his call. "Captain Reynolds will speak with you briefly after we reach cruising altitude following our meal service," Jasmine informed him, maintaining her professional tone. "Good," Blake said dismissively. "And you can tell your supervisor that I'll be filing a formal complaint about your service." "I understand, sir," Jasmine replied, then added with perfect politeness, "though I should inform you that all interactions in the cabin are recorded for security and quality control purposes." It was a small lie. The cameras in the cabin were for security only. But the momentary flash of concern on Blake's face was worth it. As she returned to her duties, Sofia Martinez stopped her with a gentle touch on the arm. "I'm an employment attorney," Sofia said quietly. "What they're doing is textbook harassment with racial undertones. If you want to pursue action against them, I'd be happy to help." The gesture of solidarity touched Jasmine deeply. "Thank you, but I have a feeling justice will work itself out in this case." "I hope so," Sofia replied. "Men like that usually fail upward unless someone stops them." The meal service proceeded with tense efficiency. Jasmine maintained her professionalism despite Blake and Tristan's continued snide comments, many just loud enough for her to hear, but not quite enough to constitute outright harassment to other passengers. As she served Blake his entree, she overheard him on another call, this one more concerning than the last. "The board vote tomorrow is crucial," he was saying. "Carter's health is worse than they're letting on. If we can block his succession plan and create enough doubt about his daughter's qualifications, we can force a leadership vacuum. That's when we make our move." The realization hit Jasmine like a physical blow. This wasn't just casual racism and entitlement, it was corporate sabotage. Blake and his associates were planning to use her father's health issues to stage what amounted to a hostile takeover. Midway through the meal service, Jasmine's phone vibrated with a message from her father's assistant. "Mr. C admitted to hospital for tests. Doctors say precautionary only. Still planning to attend tomorrow, but wanted you to know." The dual stresses, her father's health and the machinations happening right in front of her, nearly overwhelmed Jasmine's composure. For a moment, she considered revealing herself, putting an immediate end to Blake and Tristan's behavior and their plotting. But strategic patience had gotten her this far. One more day wouldn't change the outcome, and it might give her valuable intelligence on their plans. When Jasmine approached to clear Blake's plate, he made a show of checking his watch. 37 minutes for a meal service? Unacceptable. In my company, inefficiency like this would result in immediate termination. "I apologize for the wait, sir," Jasmine said mechanically, knowing any other response would only escalate the situation. "Do you even know who I am?" Blake asked, his voice dropping to a threatening register. "Yes, Mr. Whitfield. You're the CEO of Meridian Investments," Jasmine replied, using information that would be available to any crew member who checked the manifest. "That's right," he said, seemingly pleased she recognized his importance. "I control assets worth billions and employ thousands of people. One call from me to your CEO, and your career in aviation would be over." The threat, so confidently delivered, struck Jasmine as both menacing and absurdly ironic. Tomorrow, she would be the CEO he was threatening to call. Tomorrow, the power he was wielding would evaporate like mist in sunlight. But today, she was still Flight Attendant Carter, and she had a job to finish. "I understand, sir," she said simply, collecting his plate and moving on. As the flight continued westward, the tension in the cabin remained high. The champagne incident had clearly been just the beginning. With every passing minute, Blake and Tristan seemed more determined to assert their perceived superiority, unaware that the tables were about to turn in the most dramatic way possible. "Do you think Jasmine should reveal her true identity now, or wait until they land? Comment number 1 if you believe she should keep her cool, or number 2 if you think it's time for her to show these men who she really is. Hit that like button if you're ready to see Blake's face when he finally learns the truth. And now, let's see what happens when the flight takes an unexpected turn. 3 hours into the transcontinental flight, the Boeing 787 encountered a patch of turbulence that sent a ripple of tension through the cabin. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ping as Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some moderate turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts as soon as possible." Jasmine moved efficiently through the cabin, securing loose items and checking that passengers had complied with the captain's instructions. Blake Whitfield, midway through another complaint about the wine selection, gripped his armrests as the aircraft shuddered. "Is this normal?" he demanded, his earlier bravado cracking slightly as the plane dipped and rose. "Completely normal, sir," Jasmine assured him. Just a patch of unstable air. Captain Reynolds will navigate us through it shortly. The turbulence intensified, causing the aircraft to drop suddenly. A woman in row 5 let out a startled cry. Blake's knuckles whitened around the armrest. "Shouldn't you be seated?" Tristan asked Jasmine, his own face pale as the plane shook again. "We're trained to remain on duty during turbulence like this," Jasmine explained, moving steadily despite the aircraft's movements. "Please make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened." As if responding to some cosmic cue, the aircraft encountered a particularly strong air pocket, dropping several hundred feet in seconds. Overhead bins rattled, an unattended tablet slid across a table, and someone's drink tipped over. Blake let out an audible gasp, his composed facade crumbling momentarily. "This is more than moderate turbulence," he snapped, fear making his voice sharp. "Captain Reynolds is one of our most experienced pilots," Jasmine responded calmly. "He's navigated much worse conditions successfully." The turbulence continued. For several minutes, during which Jasmine demonstrated the leadership and composure that had earned her the Harvard MBA Blake had mockingly referenced earlier. She moved through the cabin with purpose, reassuring anxious passengers, securing loose items, and maintaining a calm presence that helped settle the mounting tension. In row 7, an elderly man suddenly clutched at his chest, his face contorted. In pain, his wife called out in alarm, "Help! I think he's having a heart attack." Jasmine was at their side in seconds. "Sir, can you tell me what you're feeling?" she asked, her voice steady as she assessed the situation. "Pressure, chest, left arm tingling," the man managed between labored breaths. "Michael, bring the emergency medical kit and notify the captain," Jasmine called out, already loosening the man's tie and reclining his seat slightly. "Sir, I'm going to give you some aspirin. Are you allergic to any medications?" The man shook, his head weakly. Jasmine's emergency medical training kicked in as she administered aspirin and began monitoring his vital signs. The cabin, moments ago chaotic with turbulence fears, now focused on the unfolding medical emergency. "Is there a doctor on board?" Michael announced, moving through the cabin with the medical kit. A woman from business class identified herself as a cardiologist and hurried forward. Jasmine briefed her quickly on the symptoms and steps taken so far. "Perfect response," the doctor confirmed, taking over the medical care. "You may have saved his life with your quick action." Throughout the emergency, Jasmine coordinated with the flight deck, arranged for priority landing clearance if needed, and kept other passengers calm and informed. Her poise under pressure was evident to everyone in the cabin, everyone except Blake Whitfield. "Finally calming down out there," he commented as Jasmine passed his seat after the doctor had stabilized the passenger. "Took long enough. This kind of excitement isn't what I pay premium prices for." The callousness of his response after witnessing someone's life potentially hanging in the balance stunned even Tristan, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "The passenger is stable now," Jasmine replied neutrally. "The doctor believes he'll be fine until we land." "Good," Blake said dismissively. "Now maybe we can get some actual service around here." Jasmine maintained her composure, though the effort cost her more than usual. The combination of stress from the turbulence, the medical emergency, her father's hospitalization, and Blake's relentless antagonism was testing the limits of her patience. As the flight continued and normalcy returned to the cabin, Jasmine retreated briefly to the galley to check her messages. Another update from her father's assistant confirmed what she'd feared. Victor's condition had worsened slightly, though doctors maintained it wasn't critical. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tomorrow's announcement was crucial for the company's future. When she returned to the cabin, she overheard Blake and Tristan in the middle of a conversation that immediately captured her attention. "Carter's health problems couldn't have come at a better time for us," Tristan was saying, his voice low but not quite low enough. "The board is already nervous about succession. And his brilliant idea is to hand the company to his daughter," Blake replied with a smirk. "Jasmine Carter, the diversity hire CEO. She might look good on the company brochure, but running an airline? Please. Have you seen her file?" Tristan asked. "Harvard MBA, McKinsey background. She's not entirely unqualified on paper. Papers and degrees don't run airlines," Blake dismissed. Besides, she spent the last year and a half doing what? No one seems to know. Probably some extended vacation while Daddy prepared her corner office. Jasmine felt a surge of satisfaction knowing just how wrong he was, followed immediately by concern about how they had obtained information about her background and her recent absence from public corporate life. The board meeting tomorrow is our chance, Blake continued. With Carter hospitalized and doubts about his daughter's readiness, we can push for an emergency leadership committee. Get our foot in the door. Their conversation confirmed Jasmine's worst suspicions. This wasn't just casual bigotry. It was a calculated attack on her family's company, using her father's health and prejudice against her as weapons. Just then, her phone vibrated with an urgent message. Her father's assistant again. Mr. C asking for you. Can you call when possible? Important. The timing couldn't have been worse. She needed to speak with her father, but doing so might reveal her identity if Blake or Tristan overheard. Making a quick decision, Jasmine approached Sofia Martinez. Ms. Martinez, could I ask a favor? I need to make an important personal call. Would you mind if I use the space next to your seat for a moment? It's quieter than the galley. Sofia, who had witnessed the ongoing situation, nodded immediately. Of course. Positioning herself with her back to Blake and Tristan, Jasmine called her father's hospital room. Dad, she said quietly when he answered. How are you feeling? Been better, Jazzy, Victor replied, his voice weaker than she'd expected. But don't worry, the doctors are just being cautious. Should I try to get an earlier flight back? Jasmine asked, concern evident in her whispered tone. Absolutely not, Victor insisted. Finish what you started. Everything is set for tomorrow. The board is ready, the press release drafted. We just need you there. Dad, Blake Whitfield is on my flight, Jasmine explained quickly. He's talking about using your hospitalization to challenge the succession plan. Victor's laugh turned into a slight cough. Blake always was predictable. Let him try. The board is solid. Your qualifications are impeccable. And tomorrow, you'll show everyone exactly why you're the right person to lead Aero Elite. He doesn't know I can hear his plans, Jasmine added. Thinks I'm just the help. Then you have the advantage, Victor said, wisdom evident despite his weakened state. Your mother always said, let them underestimate you. It's easier to exceed low expectations than to live up to high ones. The mention of her mother, who had passed away when Jasmine was in college, brought unexpected emotion to her throat. I miss her wisdom right now. She's with you, Jazzy. Her strength is in you, Victor assured her. Now go finish your flight. I'll see you tomorrow for the biggest day of our lives. As Jasmine ended the call, she turned to find Blake standing directly behind her, his expression suspicious. Personal calls during a crisis? He questioned, his tone accusatory. First the champagne, then the delayed medical response, now abandoning your duties for private matters. I'm beginning to think Aero Elite's training program is seriously lacking. Lao, medical situation is stable, sir, Jasmine replied evenly. All passengers are currently being attended to by other crew members. I couldn't help overhearing, Blake continued, ignoring her explanation. Something about tomorrow being the biggest day of your lives? What could possibly be so important in a flight attendant's schedule? The condescension in his voice was palpable, the implication clear. What meaningful events could someone like her possibly have in her life? Family matters, sir, Jasmine said simply, refusing to elaborate. Well, your family matter will have to wait. I need another scotch, and this time with proper ice, not the half-melted cubes you brought earlier. As Blake returned to his seat, Sofia caught Jasmine's eye with a look of disbelief. Is he for real? She mouthed silently. Jasmine gave a small shrug and professional smile, though internally her resolve was hardening. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough, but until then, she would continue gathering intelligence on exactly what Blake and his associates had planned. Returning to the galley to prepare Blake's scotch, she found Michael waiting with concerned eyes. Everything okay? Your call seemed intense, he asked. My father's in the hospital, Jasmine explained quietly. Nothing critical, but timing is terrible with tomorrow's announcement. Want me to take over Whitfield and Montgomery? You've dealt with enough today. No, Jasmine said firmly. I need to hear what else they're planning. Besides, it's just a few more hours. As she prepared the scotch, precisely chilling the glass and measuring the premium single malt, Jasmine reflected on how this experience would inform her leadership. Every moment of discomfort, every microaggression, every dismissal, all would shape her understanding of what her employees faced and how the company culture needed to change. When she delivered Blake's scotch, he was once again on his phone, this time discussing the board meeting directly. Tomorrow at 10, he was saying. Carter's daughter will be there, but with the old man hospitalized, we can raise concerns about stability. Emphasize the need for experienced leadership during this transition. Get Jameson and Lewis on our side, and we have a chance to delay the appointment, force a committee structure. As Blake noticed Jasmine's presence, he abruptly changed his tone. Yes, certainly. We'll discuss those charitable donations at the meeting. Very important cause. The poor attempt at disguising his conversation might have been amusing if the stakes weren't so high. Jasmine placed his scotch on the table with perfect service form. Your scotch, Mr. Whitfield. Glenfiddich 21, chilled glass, 2 cubes of ice. Blake barely acknowledged her, immediately returning to his call once she moved away. The conversation continued with Blake and Tristan mockingly speculating about the diversity hire CEO and how quickly they could maneuver her out of power. Their confidence was staggering, their prejudice unmistakable. They saw her gender and race as weaknesses to exploit, rather than perspectives that strengthened leadership. They viewed her father's commitment to building an airline that reflected the diversity of its passengers as a liability rather than an asset. And they had absolutely no idea that the woman they were dismissing as just another flight attendant would be sitting across from them in the boardroom tomorrow, holding their professional futures in her hands. As the flight continued westward, Jasmine's phone buzzed with another message, this one more alarming than the last. Mr. C's condition has worsened. Doctors running additional tests. Still insists on attending tomorrow. Please call when you can. The midpoint of the flight had become a crisis point for Jasmine personally and professionally. Her father's health, the company's future, and her own debut as CEO all hung in the balance, while the men plotting against her family's legacy sat oblivious in her section, demanding premium service while planning their corporate attack. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine, neither was the responsibility. Tomorrow would indeed be the biggest day of her life, assuming everything went according to plan. The flight continued westward across the American heartland, the harsh sunlight illuminating the first-class cabin with an unforgiving clarity. Blake Whitfield and Tristan Montgomery had moved from scotch to wine, their inhibitions lowering with each glass as their voices grew progressively louder. It's the principle of the thing, Blake was saying, gesturing emphatically with his wine glass. Companies shouldn't promote people just to check diversity boxes. Merit should be the only consideration. Exactly, Tristan agreed. If Carter wants to give his daughter a job, fine. But CEO? That's just irresponsible governance. Jasmine, arranging dessert options in the galley, could hear their conversation clearly despite their location several rows away. Their volume seemed intentional now, as if hoping their opinions would reach the crew areas. You know they can hear you, a woman's voice interjected, Sophia Martinez, speaking up from her seat across the aisle. So? Blake challenged, turning to face her. It's a free country. I'm allowed to express concerns about corporate leadership. There's expressing concerns, and then there's being deliberately offensive, Sophia countered. You've been disrespectful to the crew since takeoff. Blake's expression hardened. I paid $20,000 for this seat. That buys me the right to express my opinion on the service quality. It buys you a seat and premium service, Sophia corrected. Not the right to belittle people based on their race or gender. Several other passengers shifted uncomfortably, the confrontation disrupting the usually subdued atmosphere of first class. Jasmine emerged from the galley, sensing the need to diffuse the situation before it escalated further. Can I offer anyone coffee or tea with dessert? She asked pleasantly, deliberately redirecting attention. I'll take a coffee, Sophia said, offering Jasmine a supportive glance. Blake snorted derisively. Of course you would defend them. Let me guess, another DEI advocate who thinks qualification is secondary to identity. Actually, Sophia replied. Coolly, I'm an employment attorney who recognizes textbook discriminatory behavior when I see it. The word attorney visibly registered with Blake, causing a momentary recalibration in his demeanor. Tristan, however, seemed emboldened by the confrontation. Look around this cabin, he challenged, gesturing broadly. How many of these executives and success stories got where they are through actual merit versus preferential treatment? Ask yourself why certain industries have certain demographic patterns. His implication was clear. Success belonged naturally to people who looked like him, while others must have received special assistance. An older gentleman in row 4 lowered his newspaper with a frown. Young man, I built a technology company. From nothing into a Fortune 500 enterprise, and I'm the grandson of sharecroppers. Your assumptions say more about your limitations than anyone else's potential. The cabin, previously silent during the exchange, now hummed with tension. Blake, realizing he was losing the public opinion battle, attempted to redirect. This isn't about race, he insisted, though his previous comments had made it abundantly clear that it was. It's about standards. Aero Elite used to represent excellence. Now look at the service quality. The service has been impeccable, Sophia countered. Your treatment of the staff, however, has been appalling. Jasmine maintained her professional demeanor throughout the exchange, continuing to offer dessert and coffee while inwardly gratified by the support from other passengers. Not everyone was willing to sit silently while Blake and Tristan displayed their prejudice so openly. As she served coffee to a passenger in row 5, she overheard Blake, on yet another phone call, his voice lowered but still audible. The Carter situation is developing nicely, he was saying. His health crisis is perfect timing. We'll express grave concern about company stability, suggest an interim leadership committee that supports his daughter while she learns the ropes. Once we're in, we can start identifying assets for potential spin-off. The predatory nature of their plan was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about blocking her appointment. It was about dismantling her father's company piece by piece. When she returned to the galley, Captain Reynolds had stepped back to stretch his legs during the autopilot cruise phase. How's it going back here? He asked, his experienced eyes noting her tension immediately. Educational, Jasmine replied. Blake and Tristan are plotting a corporate takeover disguised as concern about my qualifications and my father's health. James frowned. Your father's health? What's happened? He's been admitted to the hospital, Jasmine explained. Tests and observation, supposedly nothing critical, but the timing couldn't be worse. Those vultures, James muttered. Always circling when they sense vulnerability. The good news is, I'm hearing their entire strategy, Jasmine said. They have no idea I can counter every move they're planning before they make it. Want me to create a distraction? Maybe some moderate turbulence right over Whitfield's seat? James offered with a half smile. Tempting, but no, Jasmine laughed. I need to hear more. Knowledge is power right now. James nodded his understanding. Your father would be proud of how you're handling this. 20 years I've flown for Victor, and I've never seen him lose his cool no matter the provocation. You've got that same steel. The comparison to her father touched Jasmine deeply. Victor Carter had built Aero Elite from a regional carrier with 2 planes into an international luxury airline with a fleet of 87 aircraft, all while facing barriers and prejudice that would have stopped most people. His resilience had always been her inspiration. Blake mentioned knowing you from some club, Jasmine said, changing the subject. James rolled his eyes. Met him once at a charity golf tournament. He shot 100 and claimed it was because of his clubs. Man couldn't handle being outplayed. By a black pilot. Their conversation was interrupted by Michael, who appeared with an urgent expression. Jasmine, Whitfield is demanding to speak with the captain about the unprofessional atmosphere in the cabin. Says passengers are making him uncomfortable with their political correctness. James shook his head in disbelief. The irony is staggering. I'll handle it, he assured Jasmine. 20 years of diplomatic experience dealing with entitled passengers. This should be interesting. As James returned to the cabin, Jasmine's phone vibrated with another message. Update on Mr. C, condition stable but tests concerning. Doctors advising against attending tomorrow. He's insisting on being there. Decision pending. The news sent a wave of concern through Jasmine. If her father couldn't attend tomorrow's announcement, it would give Blake and his allies exactly the opening they needed to challenge the succession plan. The optics of Victor's absence would support their narrative about instability and rushed succession. When she returned to the cabin, James was standing near Blake's seat, his captain's authority evident in his posture. "Mr. Whitfield, I understand you had concerns about the cabin atmosphere," James asked professionally. "Yes, Captain Reynolds," Blake replied, clearly pleased to be addressing someone he considered his equal. "The service has been substandard, and when I expressed legitimate concerns, other passengers became hostile." "I see," James said neutrally. "Can you specify what service issues you've experienced?" "Warm champagne, spilled drinks, slow response times," Blake listed, "and a general attitude problem from certain staff members." James nodded thoughtfully. "Our service metrics for this flight actually show above-average response times and customer satisfaction. As for the spilled drink, our aircraft encountered documented turbulence at that time, affecting multiple service items throughout the cabin." "Well, there's still the matter of attitude," Blake insisted, unwilling to concede. "A premium ticket should guarantee respectful service." "I completely agree," James replied evenly. "Respect should flow in both directions. Our cameras and audio systems document all cabin interactions for security purposes. If there's been disrespectful behavior from any party, it would be captured in those recordings." The subtle reminder that Blake's behavior was being recorded caused a flicker of uncertainty across his face. "Just ensure your staff maintains proper professionalism for the remainder of the flight," Blake said, attempting to salvage his authority in the exchange. "All Aero Elite employees are held to the highest standards," James assured him with perfect professionalism. "Myself included. Will there be anything else, Mr. Whitfield?" "That's all for now," Blake replied, dismissing him with a wave that betrayed his discomfort at being outmaneuvered. As James returned to the cockpit, Jasmine caught his subtle wink. Small victories, but satisfying nonetheless. The confrontation had momentarily subdued Blake and Tristan, but it wasn't long before they resumed their planning, though with slightly lowered voices. Jasmine, serving coffee to nearby passengers, remained within earshot. "We need to frame this carefully tomorrow," Blake was saying. "Express sincere concern for Victor's health, then pivot to company stability. Suggest a leadership committee as the responsible approach during a health crisis." "What about the daughter?" Tristan asked. "Sources say she's actually qualified on paper." "Papers and degrees don't run airlines," Blake dismissed. "Besides, where has she been for the past 18 months? No significant corporate role, no public profile. We'll suggest she take a COO position first, learn the business under more experienced leadership." "Meaning us," Tristan smirked. "Exactly. We guide the transition, identify inefficiencies, streamline operations, and position ourselves for the eventual acquisition." The predatory nature of their plan was now completely clear. This wasn't about concern for Aero Elite. It was about dismantling a successful Black-owned business and absorbing its profitable parts. Jasmine thought of her father's journey, mortgaging everything he owned to buy his first plane, facing rejection from 37 banks before finding one willing to loan to a Black entrepreneur, building route by route and plane by plane into a billion-dollar enterprise. She thought of the 20,000 employees whose livelihoods depended on Aero Elite's continued success. Her resolve hardened. Tomorrow, Blake Whitfield would learn exactly who he had been dismissing and demeaning. Tomorrow, she would protect her father's legacy and the company's future. As the flight continued, Blake made another call, this one even more concerning than the previous conversations. "Yes, I need everything you can find on Jasmine Carter's last 18 months, he was saying. "Employment records, social media, credit card trails, anything. There has to be something we can use to question her readiness for the role." They were actively digging for dirt, looking for any angle to undermine her appointment. The irony was, her disappearance from corporate life had been her undercover work at Aero Elite, something that would actually strengthen her qualifications rather than diminish them. Sophia, who had been observing the ongoing situation with increasing concern, stopped Jasmine as she passed. "I know it's not my place," she said quietly, "but you should document everything these men are saying. It sounds like they're planning something that could potentially cross legal lines." "Thank you," Jasmine replied with genuine appreciation. "I'm keeping track." "I've been recording some of their more inappropriate comments," Sophia admitted, showing Jasmine her phone discreetly. "Just in case you need evidence later. What they're doing isn't just rude, some of it borders on corporate espionage." The eye gesture of solidarity touched Jasmine deeply. Throughout her career, she'd encountered both obstacles and allies. It was always the allies, people willing to stand up against injustice even when it didn't directly affect them, who restored her faith in progress. "That's incredibly thoughtful," Jasmine said. "I may actually take you up on that offer." As the flight passed its midpoint and began the long descent toward the Pacific coast, the conflict in first class had developed into something far beyond typical passenger complaints. What had begun as casual bigotry had revealed itself as a calculated attack on a successful Black-owned business, using every available prejudice and vulnerability as leverage. Jasmine, serving throughout it all with professional composure, was gathering intelligence with every interaction, preparing for the confrontation that awaited in tomorrow's boardroom. The balance of power would shift dramatically in less than 24 hours, but until then, she remained Flight Attendant Carter, watching, listening, and planning her response to every move Blake and Tristan were plotting. The deepening conflict was no longer just about one uncomfortable flight or personal dignity in the face of discrimination. It had become a battle for her father's legacy, for the future of 20,000 employees, and for the principle that excellence couldn't be defined by or limited to any single race, gender, or background. As the sun began its westward descent, so too did the aircraft, beginning the long approach to Los Angeles and the confrontation that awaited at journey's end. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Comment number 1 if you think she should continue gathering evidence against Blake and Tristan, or number 2 if you believe it's time to reveal her true identity and put an end to their scheme right now. Don't forget to like this video if you're ready to see these entitled passengers get the shock of their lives. How much more can Jasmine endure before she reaches her breaking point? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. Due to unexpected weather conditions over the Los Angeles area, we've been instructed to enter a holding pattern. Current estimates suggest a delay of approximately 90 minutes before we'll be cleared for landing. We apologize for the inconvenience, and will update you as we receive more information. The collective groan throughout the cabin reflected the universal frustration of delayed travelers, but nowhere was the tension more palpable than in first class. Blake Whitfield immediately pressed his call button, his face flushed with indignation. "Is this some kind of joke?" he demanded when Jasmine approached. "I have a critical meeting immediately after landing." "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir," Jasmine replied professionally. "The weather system moved in unexpectedly. All arrivals into LAX are currently delayed." "This is completely unacceptable," Blake fumed. "Your airline should have anticipated this and adjusted the flight plan accordingly." The irrationality of blaming an airline for weather patterns was so absurd that Jasmine might have laughed under different circumstances. Instead, she maintained her composure, aware that the extended flight time would only increase the strain of the situation. "I'll ask Captain Reynolds for any alternatives," she offered, knowing full well there were none but recognizing Blake's need to feel that special action was being taken for him. As she turned to leave, Blake added, "And bring me another scotch, double this time." Tristan leaned forward. "Make that 2. If we're stuck here, might as well make it tolerable." In the galley, Jasmine conferred briefly with Michael, both recognizing that additional alcohol would likely worsen an already volatile situation. "Maybe suggest alternate beverages," Michael proposed. "Coffee, water, juice?" "They'd see right through that," Jasmine sighed. "Let's serve half pours, but in the larger glasses. Looks the same but less alcohol. When she returned with the drinks, Blake was again on his phone, his voice raised in frustration. "I don't care what it takes. I need to be at that board meeting tomorrow at 10. Carter's health crisis gives us the perfect opening, but only if I'm physically present to lead the concerns." The casual way he referenced her father's health as a perfect opening sent a wave of cold anger through Jasmine. This wasn't business strategy. It was predatory opportunism targeting a man currently in a hospital bed. "Your scotch, gentlemen," she said, placing the drinks before them with perfect service form. Blake barely acknowledged her, continuing his conversation. "The succession announcement is vulnerable. If Carter's too ill to attend and we raise legitimate governance concerns about his daughter's qualifications, we can force a compromise. Leadership committee, interim oversight, whatever creates an opening." As the holding pattern continued and the cabin crew attempted to make passengers comfortable during the delay, Jasmine received another message that sent a chill through her. Mr. C condition worsened. Doctors insisting he remain hospitalized. Tomorrow's announcement in jeopardy. Call immediately. Finding a private moment in the rear galley, Jasmine called her father's assistant. "How bad is it?" she asked without preamble. "Tests show possible minor cardiac event," the assistant explained. "Nothing life-threatening, but doctors are adamant he needs rest and monitoring. He's still insisting on attending tomorrow, but medical advice is strongly against it." "Put him on," Jasmine requested, needing to hear her father's voice directly. After a moment, Victor's voice came through, noticeably weaker than earlier. "Jazzy, don't worry. These doctors are overreacting. Dad, if they say you need to rest, you should listen," Jasmine insisted, concern evident in her whispered tone. "The announcement can happen without you physically present," she finished for him. "We'll set up video, show everyone you're recovering but still in charge. Your health matters more than optics." There was a pause before Victor replied. "Blake, Whitfield will use my absence to challenge the succession plan." "I know. He's on my flight, plotting as we speak," Jasmine confirmed. "But I'm gathering everything we need to counter him. Trust me, Dad. I've got this." Another pause, then Victor's voice softened. "I always have, Jazzy, from the day you were born." The emotion in his voice nearly broke Jasmine's professional facade. "Rest, Dad. Focus on getting better. I'll handle tomorrow." After ending the call, Jasmine took a moment to collect herself, aware that the situation had just become significantly more complicated. Without her father physically present at tomorrow's announcement, Blake would indeed have more leverage to challenge the succession plan, painting it as rushed during a health crisis. Returning to the cabin, she found the atmosphere had deteriorated further. Blake and Tristan, now several drinks in despite her attempt at moderation, had grown louder and more openly hostile. Their conversation had shifted from business strategy to more overtly racist commentary. "That's the problem with these diversity initiatives," Blake was saying, his voice carrying throughout the first-class cabin. "They prioritize appearance over competence. An airline isn't a social justice project, it's a business." "Exactly," Tristan agreed enthusiastically. "Carter built something impressive, no question. But turning it over to his daughter just because she checks demographic boxes, that's how you destroy shareholder value." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably at the explicit nature of their comments. Sofia Martinez visibly bristled, while the elderly gentleman who had spoken up earlier folded his newspaper with deliberate precision, his disapproval evident. As Jasmine passed with fresh water service, Blake addressed her directly for the first time in hours. "Tell me honestly," he demanded, his tone condescending. "Wouldn't you rather be hired for your actual abilities rather than to fill some quota?" The question, loaded with assumptions and prejudice, created an immediate hush in the surrounding rows. All eyes turned to Jasmine, waiting to see how she would respond to this direct confrontation. "Sir," she replied with remarkable composure, "I was hired for my qualifications, experience, and ability to perform this job professionally, which, includes serving all passengers with equal courtesy regardless of their behavior." The subtle rebuke was not lost on the listening passengers, several of whom suppressed smiles at her poised response. Blake, however, was too intoxicated and self-absorbed to recognize the admonishment. "See? That's what I'm talking about," he said to Tristan, as if Jasmine had somehow proven his point. "People should be judged on merit, not identity. If Carter's daughter is qualified, fine. But if she's getting the job because of who and what she is, that's just bad business." The irony of his statement, advocating for meritocracy while dismissing Jasmine based solely on her appearance, was apparently lost on him. "Sir, would you like still or sparkling water?" Jasmine asked, deliberately redirecting the conversation to service. "What I'd like," Blake said, his voice taking on a nasty edge, "is competent service without political correctness lectures from other passengers." "I understand, sir," Jasmine replied neutrally. "Still or sparkling water?" "Neither," he snapped. "Just get me another scotch, and make it a proper pour this time, not whatever half measure you brought earlier." As Jasmine turned to fulfill his request, Blake added loudly, "And tell your captain friend that some of us have actual important meetings to get to. Board positions don't secure themselves." The entitled demand, coupled with the thinly veiled reference to his plans against her family's company, tested Jasmine's composure more than any previous interaction. For a brief moment, she considered ending the charade, revealing her identity, and watching the smug confidence drain from Blake's face. But strategic patience had gotten her this far. One more day of gathering intelligence would better prepare her for tomorrow's confrontation. In the galley, Jasmine received yet another message, this one from the company's general counsel. Board members Jameson and Lewis receiving calls from Blake Whitfield's associates. Concerns being raised about succession plan timing given Victor's health. Need to discuss counter-strategy ASAP. So Blake's plan was already in motion, his allies reaching out to potentially sympathetic board members. Before the official meeting, the situation was deteriorating rapidly, both in the air and on the ground. When Jasmine returned with Blake's scotch, she found him and Tristan openly discussing which Aero Elite assets could be sold off or restructured after they gained influence. The maintenance division alone could be spun off for millions, Tristan was saying. Outsourced to Mexico, cut costs by 40%. And those premium routes to Asia? Perfect acquisition targets for global airways, Blake added. Carter built something valuable. He just doesn't know how to maximize its potential. Those premium routes represent years of diplomatic negotiations and relationship building, Jasmine found herself saying before she could stop herself. They are valuable because of service quality and consistency, not just landing slots. Blake and Tristan stared at her in surprise, clearly not expecting such specific knowledge from a flight attendant. "And you know this how?" Blake demanded suspiciously. Jasmine quickly recovered. "Company training includes understanding our competitive advantages. Those routes are frequently mentioned in our service briefings." Blake's eyes narrowed, not entirely convinced but unable to articulate why her comment had seemed unusual. "Well, your training is incomplete. Those routes are underperforming on yield per mile metrics. Only if you measure quarterly, rather than annual returns," Jasmine countered, then immediately regretted the specific nature of her knowledge. Blake set down his scotch slowly. "You seem unusually informed about corporate finance for cabin crew." "I have an interest in business," Jasmine replied vaguely. "Many Aero Elite employees invest in company stock through our employee ownership program." The explanation seemed to satisfy him, but Jasmine knew she'd need to be more careful. Her natural business acumen and specific knowledge of Aero Elite's operations could easily expose her if she wasn't cautious. As the holding pattern continued and frustrations mounted throughout the cabin, Blake's behavior became increasingly inappropriate. When Jasmine passed his seat during another service round, he deliberately brushed his hand against hers in a way that couldn't be dismissed as accidental. "Excuse me, sir," Jasmine said firmly, pulling her hand away. "Just checking if the service includes a personal touch," Blake remarked with a smirk toward Tristan, who chuckled uncomfortably, seemingly less comfortable with this escalation. "It does not," Jasmine stated unequivocally, her voice carrying a warning edge that surprised even her. "Physical contact with crew members is inappropriate and against company policy." Blake's expression darkened at the public rebuke. Careful with your tone. One call to Victor Carter after we land, and you'll be looking for a new career." The threat, delivered with such casual confidence, would have been terrifying to an actual flight attendant dependent on the job. For Jasmine, it was merely the final confirmation of Blake's character, or lack thereof. "I'll keep that in mind, sir," she replied, maintaining her professionalism despite the provocation. Sophia, who had witnessed the exchange, stood up and approached the galley where Jasmine had retreated. "That was harassment," she said quietly. "Plain and simple. I have it recorded if you want to file a report." "Thank you," Jasmine replied sincerely. "I may take you up on that offer soon." The situation reached its darkest point when Blake, now visibly intoxicated despite the crew's attempts to moderate his consumption, spilled his scotch deliberately on the aisle carpet. "Oops," he said with exaggerated insincerity. "Looks like someone needs to clean that up before it stains." When Jasmine arrived with cleaning supplies, Blake added loudly, "See, Tristan? Some roles are just naturally suited to certain people. It's not prejudice. It's reality." The comment, so explicitly racist it couldn't be disguised as anything else, created an immediate tension throughout the cabin. Several passengers visibly recoiled at the statement, while others looked away in uncomfortable silence. Jasmine knelt to clean the spill, her face burning with humiliation not for the task itself, which was indeed part of her current role, but for the deliberate attempt to demean her in front of the entire cabin. As she worked, Blake continued his commentary. "Tomorrow's board meeting will be illuminating. Time to restore meritocracy to Carter's little experiment in social justice." When Jasmine stood after cleaning the spill, Blake deliberately extended his leg into her path, causing her to stumble slightly. As she caught herself, he accidentally knocked his fresh drink directly onto her uniform. "Clumsy service," he remarked, as the amber liquid soaked through the fabric of her blazer. Exactly the kind of incompetence I was talking about. It was the final indignity in a flight full of them, a deliberate act meant to humiliate and establish dominance. For a moment, the cabin held its collective breath, waiting to see how she would respond. With superhuman composure, Jasmine simply said, "I'll get you a replacement drink, sir," and turned toward the galley. Once out of sight, she leaned against the counter, taking deep, measured breaths to control the wave of anger threatening to overwhelm her professional demeanor. The champagne incident earlier had been arguably accidental. This was an intentional act of disrespect. Michael appeared beside her, concern evident in his eyes. "That's it. I'm telling the captain to have security meet the flight. That was assault." "No," Jasmine said firmly. "Not yet." "Jasmine, this has gone too far," Michael insisted. "No job requires you to endure this kind of treatment." "It's not about the job anymore," she explained quietly. "It's about gathering everything I need to end his career tomorrow." Michael studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, understanding the bigger picture. "At least change your uniform. I'll cover your section." In the tiny lavatory, Jasmine removed her stained blazer and assessed the damage to her blouse underneath. The scotch had soaked through, leaving a visible stain and the lingering smell of alcohol. She did her best to clean it with dampened paper towels, but the evidence of Blake's deliberate act remained. As she stared at her reflection in the mirror, Jasmine faced the darkest moment of her journey. Her father was hospitalized, potentially unable to attend tomorrow's crucial announcement. Blake and his allies were already working to undermine the succession plan, and she had endured hours of escalating discrimination and harassment while maintaining her cover. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was she really ready for the challenges awaiting her as CEO? Could she handle the Blake Whitfields of the corporate world, who would challenge her authority and question her qualifications at every turn? Then she remembered her father's words from years ago. Leadership isn't about avoiding difficult situations. It's about how you handle them when they inevitably arise. Today had been a masterclass in handling difficult situations with grace, intelligence, and strategic patience. If she could maintain her composure through this flight, the boardroom would be manageable by comparison. Returning to the cabin in her stained uniform, a deliberate choice to document Blake's behavior, Jasmine found the atmosphere had shifted, Slightly. Several passengers were now openly glaring at Blake and Tristan, the collective tolerance for their behavior having finally reached its limit. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared to begin our approach to Los Angeles. Weather conditions have improved, and we expect to be on the ground in approximately 40 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." The announcement brought visible relief to the passengers, many of whom had grown increasingly uncomfortable during the extended holding pattern. Blake checked his watch with exaggerated impatience. "About time," he muttered. "Some of us have actual business to conduct, not just serving drinks and cleaning spills." The comment, clearly intended for Jasmine to overhear, no longer had the power to wound her. The hours of harassment had paradoxically strengthened her resolve, rather than weakening it. Tomorrow, the power dynamic would reverse completely, and Blake would learn exactly who he had been demeaning. As she moved through the cabin securing items for landing, Jasmine received a photo message from her father's hospital room. Victor Carter lay in a hospital bed, medical equipment monitoring his condition, but he was smiling and giving a thumbs up. The caption read, "Dad insists on sending you this. Says to tell you he's proud and ready for tomorrow, even if by video." The image of her father, weakened but undefeated, brought tears to Jasmine's eyes that she quickly blinked away. She had inherited his resilience, his strategic patience, and his ability to see beyond immediate circumstances to the larger goal. When she passed Blake's seat during final preparations, he made one last attempt to assert dominance. "When we land," he said, his voice low but deliberately intimidating, "I want your full name for my complaint to Carter. Your career ends tomorrow." Jasmine paused, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time during the flight. "I'll be sure you have all the information you need, Mr. Whitfield. I want there to be no confusion about exactly who served you today." Something in her tone momentarily unsettled him, a confidence that seemed incongruous with her position and the treatment she'd endured. But the moment passed quickly as Blake dismissed the subtle warning. "Just do your job and prepare the cabin for landing," he sneered. "That's all you're qualified for." As the aircraft began its final descent into Los Angeles, Jasmine moved through her landing preparations with mechanical precision, her mind already racing ahead to tomorrow's confrontation. The darkest hour was passing, and dawn, with its promise of justice and vindication, was approaching rapidly. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner touched down at Los Angeles International Airport with a gentle bump, its massive tires smoking briefly as they made contact with the runway. Inside the first-class cabin, the passengers applauded spontaneously, partly from relief after the extended holding pattern and partly from the universal human gratitude for a safe landing. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles," Captain Reynolds announced over the intercom. "Local time is 4:27 p.m., and the temperature is a pleasant 72 degrees. We've arrived approximately 90 minutes behind schedule, due to the weather delay. On behalf of Aero Elite Airways and your entire flight crew, I'd like to thank you for your patience today." Blake Whitfield was already reaching for his phone, powering it on before the aircraft had even reached the gate, blatantly ignoring the electronic device restrictions still in effect. Finally, he muttered to Tristan, "Now I can start damage control on this Carter situation." Jasmine, securing the galley for arrival, checked her own messages discreetly. A new update from her father's assistant confirmed that Victor was stable, but would definitely not attend tomorrow's board meeting in person. Video arrangements had been made, and the General Counsel had prepared strategies to counter any challenges to the succession plan. There was also a message from Aero Elite's head of security. "Per your request, plainclothes team will be at arrival gate. Just give the signal if needed." The security presence hadn't been Jasmine's idea. Captain Reynolds had made the arrangement after witnessing Blake's behavior. But she appreciated the backup. Not that she expected to need it. Her revenge would come in the boardroom tomorrow, not at the arrival gate today. As the aircraft taxied toward the terminal, Jasmine made a decision. Throughout the flight, she had maintained her cover despite escalating provocation. But now, with landing imminent and her duty complete, a subtle shift in strategy seemed appropriate. Not a full revelation, but perhaps a few carefully placed hints to unsettle Blake before tomorrow's confrontation. Moving through the cabin for a final check, she approached Blake and Tristan with her professional smile firmly in place. Mr. Whitfield, Mr. Montgomery, thank you for flying with Aero Elite today. I understand you have an important board meeting tomorrow morning. Blake looked up, surprised by her direct reference to his plans. That's right. Why? Just confirming. You'll have enough time to prepare given our delay, Jasmine replied smoothly. Aero Elite values its business travelers and their professional commitments. Well, this delay certainly didn't help, Blake said, his tone accusatory. Nor did the substandard service. I'm sorry you feel that way, Jasmine responded, maintaining eye contact with unwavering confidence. Your feedback is important to us, especially regarding tomorrow's discussions about company leadership. Blake's expression shifted from dismissive to suspicious. What do you know about tomorrow's discussions? Only what I've overheard during the flight, Jasmine replied with deliberate ambiguity. Regarding Victor Carter's health and his succession plans, the implication that she had been listening to their supposedly private conversations visibly unsettled Blake. You've been eavesdropping on business conversations? Not at all, sir. But voices carry in an aircraft cabin, especially when passengers speak about sensitive corporate matters at high volume after several scotches. The pointed comment hit its mark. Blake's face flushed with a combination of anger and uncertainty. Your name, he demanded. I want your full name for my complaint. Of course, Jasmine replied calmly. It's Jasmine Carter. For a moment, the name didn't register. Then Blake's eyes widened slightly as the possible connection dawned on him. Carter? It's a common name, Jasmine said with practiced nonchalance, though I'm actually quite familiar with Aero Elite's corporate structure and leadership succession plans. The strategic ambiguity of her statement left Blake visibly unsettled, uncertain whether this was coincidence or something more significant. Before he could pursue the question further, the aircraft came to a complete stop at the gate, and the seatbelt sign chimed off. If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare the door for arrival, Jasmine said professionally. Enjoy your board meeting tomorrow, Mr. Whitfield. I have a feeling it will be quite illuminating for everyone involved. As she walked away, she could feel Blake's confused stare following her. The seed of doubt had been planted. Not enough to fully expose her identity, but sufficient to create unease heading into tomorrow's confrontation. In the galley, Michael gave her a questioning look. Did you just? Not exactly, Jasmine replied with a small smile. Just providing exemplary customer service by taking an interest in our passengers' upcoming plans. The aircraft door opened, and first-class passengers began gathering their belongings, eager to disembark after the extended flight. Blake and Tristan huddled together, their earlier bravado diminished by uncertainty, speaking in hushed tones that suggested they were discussing Jasmine's parting comments. As protocol dictated, Jasmine took her position near the exit to thank departing passengers. One by one, they filed past her, many offering sympathetic smiles or subtle nods of support after witnessing her treatment during the flight. Sofia Martinez paused as she reached the door. That was masterfully handled, she said quietly. Whatever happens next, I hope justice is served. I believe it will be, Jasmine assured her. Thank you for your support today. Blake and Tristan approached the exit last, clearly deliberate in their timing. Blake stopped directly in front of Jasmine, studying her face with new scrutiny. Carter is a common name, he said, repeating her earlier statement. But your familiarity with corporate matters seems unusual for cabin crew. I take an interest in the company I work for, Jasmine replied simply, as should all employees regardless of position. We'll see how long that employment lasts after my conversation with Victor tomorrow, Blake threatened, though with noticeably less conviction than earlier. I'm quite confident about my future with Aero Elite, Jasmine responded with perfect composure. More so than you might be about yours, Mr. Whitfield. The cryptic comment visibly rattled him. For the first time during their interactions, Blake seemed genuinely uncertain, sensing a shift in power he couldn't quite identify. Let's go, Blake, Tristan urged, clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected tension. We have preparations to make for tomorrow. As they exited the aircraft, Jasmine caught Captain Reynolds' eye from the cockpit doorway. He gave her a subtle thumbs up, acknowledging her handling of the situation. "Ms. Carter," he called formally, loud enough for Blake to hear as he walked down the jet bridge. "Will you be needing transport to headquarters for tomorrow's meeting?" The question, deliberately timed and phrased, caused Blake to falter mid-step, glancing back with renewed suspicion. Jasmine maintained her professional smile, neither confirming nor denying the implication. "I've made arrangements, Captain. Thank you." With Blake and Tristan finally off the aircraft, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The longest flight of her career, literally and figuratively, was complete. She had endured discrimination, harassment, and deliberate humiliation while gathering valuable intelligence about the threat to her family's company. Tomorrow, Blake Whitfield would learn exactly who had been serving his scotch and tolerating his bigotry. Tomorrow, the tables would turn completely. As the crew completed their post-flight duties, Jasmine received another message from her father. "Doctors say I'm stable, might not make the office, but will join by video. How was the flight?" "Educational," she texted back. Blake Whitfield was on board, gathered everything we need to counter his move tomorrow. Victor's response came quickly. "That's my girl. Never let them see you sweat." Michael approached as she was changing out of her stained uniform in the crew area. "So tomorrow's the big day," he said. "CEO Jasmine Carter takes the helm." "Assuming Blake doesn't successfully derail the announcement," Jasmine replied, her practical nature never allowing for premature celebration. "After what I witnessed today, I almost feel sorry for him," Michael said with a grin. "Almost, but not quite. I don't want revenge," Jasmine clarified, zipping her garment bag closed. "I want accountability. There's a difference. Well, whatever you call it, I have a feeling tomorrow will be a day Blake Whitfield remembers for a very long time." As Jasmine prepared to leave the airport, she made a detour to the airline's operations center. There, she requested copies of the cabin security footage from the flight, focusing specifically on Blake's interactions with her. The harassment, the deliberate drink spill, the inappropriate comments, all were now preserved as evidence. Sophia Martinez had also forwarded her audio recordings of Blake and Tristan's more problematic comments, along with a witness statement describing their behavior. The documentation was thorough and damning, providing Jasmine with powerful ammunition should Blake attempt to challenge her authority tomorrow. Before heading to her hotel, Jasmine made one final stop, the hospital where her father was being monitored. Victor Carter sat propped up in bed, medical monitors beeping steadily beside him, his powerful frame somehow diminished by the hospital gown and setting. "There she is," he said as she entered, his voice weaker than usual but his eyes bright with pride. "Aero Elite's next CEO." Jasmine embraced him carefully, mindful of the monitoring equipment. "How are you feeling? Really?" "Like I'm getting old," Victor admitted with a wry smile. "But not finished yet. Not by a long shot." "The doctors say you need rest," Jasmine reminded him gently. "And I'll get it after we secure the company's future tomorrow," Victor insisted. "Tell me about Whitfield. What's he planning?" Jasmine outlined everything she had learned during the flight. Blake's strategy to use Victor's health crisis to challenge the succession plan, his attempt to secure allies on the board, and his ultimate goal of dismantling Aero Elite for parts. "Not very original," Victor observed when she finished. "Men like Blake lack vision. They can only destroy, never build." "He was awful, Dad," Jasmine admitted, allowing herself to acknowledge the personal toll of the day now that they were alone. "The things he said, the way he treated me." Victor's expression hardened. "I'm sorry you had to endure that, Jazzy. No one should face such disrespect." "I'm not sorry," Jasmine replied, surprising herself with the realization. "Today was difficult. Yes, but it showed me exactly what we're fighting against. Not just Blake, but the mindset he represents. People who believe success belongs exclusively to them because of who they are, not what they've accomplished." Victor nodded slowly. "You've always seen the bigger picture. That's why you'll be a better CEO than I ever was." "Not better," Jasmine corrected gently. Just different. You built something extraordinary from nothing. My job is to protect and expand it. Starting with dealing with Blake Whitfield tomorrow, Victor added with a smile that briefly recaptured his usual vigor. He won't know what hit him, Jasmine promised. As she left the hospital that evening, Jasmine felt the weight of the day's events lifting from her shoulders. The turning point had arrived, not just in her confrontation with Blake, but in her journey from undercover flight attendant to public CEO. Tomorrow would bring challenges, certainly. Blake and his allies wouldn't surrender easily. Her father's absence from the physical meeting would create vulnerability. The board would need reassurance about the transition during a health crisis. But for the first time since the champagne had dripped down her uniform hours earlier, Jasmine felt completely confident in her ability to handle whatever came next. Blake had shown his true character and revealed his entire strategy, while underestimating her at every turn. The darkest hour had passed. Dawn and justice awaited. The Aero Elite corporate headquarters gleamed in the morning Los Angeles sunshine, its glass and steel architecture reflecting the company's modern approach to aviation. Inside the executive floor, preparations for the board meeting were underway, with technical staff setting up video conferencing equipment to allow Victor Carter to participate from his hospital room. Jasmine arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit that echoed Aero Elite's corporate colors while projecting confidence and authority. The executive assistant who greeted her, accustomed to seeing her in business attire rather than a flight attendant's uniform, showed no surprise at her transformation. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," she said professionally. "The board members are arriving now. We've arranged the video link to your father's hospital room as requested." "Thank you, Angela," Jasmine replied, reviewing the meeting agenda with practiced ease. "Has Mr. Whitfield arrived yet?" "Not yet, but he confirmed he's on his way. His assistant called to ensure his board materials were ready." Jasmine nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Blake's board materials were indeed ready, including several documents he wasn't expecting. One by one, the board members arrived, greeting Jasmine with the respect her position as Victor's daughter and presumptive successor commanded. Most had known her for years and were familiar with her qualifications and preparation for the role. A few, however, seemed slightly reserved, suggesting that Blake's preliminary outreach had indeed raised questions about the succession plan. At 9:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled start, Blake Whitfield and Tristan Montgomery strode into the executive reception area with the confidence of men who believed themselves to be in control of the situation. Blake was impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that had replaced yesterday's stained attire, his manner projecting authority and purpose. When he spotted Jasmine standing near the boardroom entrance, he faltered momentarily, confusion flashing across his features as he processed her transformed appearance. Gone was the flight attendant's uniform, replaced by executive attire that unmistakably conveyed her actual status. "Ms. Carter?" he managed, his voice betraying his uncertainty. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield," Jasmine replied pleasantly. "Thank you for being punctual. The board appreciates timeliness." Blake stared at her, visibly struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the flight attendant he had demeaned throughout yesterday's journey. "You work in the corporate office?" "You could say that," Jasmine acknowledged with deliberate ambiguity. "We should head inside. The meeting is about to begin." Still visibly unsettled, Blake followed her into the boardroom with Tristan trailing behind, whispering urgently in his ear. The boardroom was arranged with the CEO's position at the head of the table, currently vacant but with a placard, reading Victor Carter, Chairman and CEO, and the remaining board members seated along both sides. A large screen on the wall was ready to display Victor's video feed from the hospital. Jasmine took her seat at Victor's right hand, the traditional position for a second-in-command or designated successor. Blake, noting her placement, leaned toward board member Richard Jameson and whispered something that made the older man frown and shake his head slightly. Whatever Blake had suggested had apparently not received the expected support. At precisely 10 o'clock, the video link activated, and Victor Carter appeared on screen, sitting upright in his hospital bed, but dressed in a dress shirt and tie, projecting as much authority as his situation allowed. "Good morning, everyone," Victor greeted the board, his voice stronger than it had been during Jasmine's hospital visit. "Thank you for accommodating this unusual arrangement. As you can see, I'm temporarily indisposed but very much engaged in today's proceedings." The board chairman, William Foster, opened the meeting formally. "This special session of the Aero Elite Airways Board of Directors is now in session. Our primary agenda item today is the Leadership Succession Plan, which Chairman Carter will present." Victor nodded from the screen. "Thank you, William. As you all know, I've been preparing for this transition for several years. My recent health concerns have simply accelerated our timeline slightly." He paused, making eye contact with each board member through the video feed. "Today, I am formally announcing my intention to step into the role of Executive Chairman, while appointing my daughter, Jasmine Carter, as Chief Executive Officer of Aero Elite Airways, effective immediately." Blake shifted in his seat, clearly preparing to raise objections, but Victor continued before he could interject. "Before anyone expresses concerns about nepotism or qualifications, let me outline Jasmine's preparation for this role. Princeton, undergraduate with honors, Harvard MBA, 6 years at McKinsey Consulting where she specialized in transportation and logistics." Victor paused, then delivered the revelation Jasmine had been waiting for. "And for the past 18 months, Jasmine has been working undercover as a flight attendant on our routes, learning our operations from the ground up, experiencing our service as our customers and employees do, and preparing detailed recommendations for improvements across all aspects of our business." The boardroom fell silent as the implications of this statement registered. All eyes turned to Jasmine, then to Blake, whose face had drained of color as he finally understood the full magnitude of his miscalculation on yesterday's flight. "In fact," Victor continued, seeming to draw energy from the dramatic moment, "Mr. Whitfield experienced Jasmine's dedicated service firsthand on yesterday's transcontinental flight from New York, though he may not have fully appreciated the caliber of person serving his scotch." The pointed reference caused several board members to glance curiously between Jasmine and Blake, sensing an undercurrent they didn't yet fully understand. Blake attempted to regain his composure, clearing his throat before addressing the board. "While I appreciate Ms. Carter's unconventional preparation, I must express concerns about the timing of this succession given Victor's health crisis. Corporate governance best practices would suggest a more measured transition, perhaps with an interim leadership committee to ensure stability during this uncertain period." It was the strategy Jasmine had heard him rehearsing throughout yesterday's flight, now delivered with professional polish that almost disguised its self-serving nature. "That's a fair concern, Blake," Jasmine responded before anyone else could, her voice calm and authoritative. "Continuity during leadership transitions is indeed crucial. That's precisely why my father and I have been preparing for this moment for years, not days." She opened a folder and distributed documents to each board member. "You'll find here my comprehensive transition plan, including first 100-day priorities, management structure recommendations, and financial projections based on my analysis of our operations." The thoroughness of the materials visibly impressed the board members, who began reviewing the documents with interest. Blake received his copy with reluctance, his earlier confidence noticeably diminished. "Additionally," Jasmine continued, "I've included a separate report addressing specific challenges facing our Asian routes and maintenance operations. Both areas Mr. Whitfield expressed particular interest in during conversations with Mr. Montgomery on yesterday's flight." The deliberate reference to his private conversations caused Blake to stiffen, his eyes narrowing as he realized how much Jasmine had overheard during his unguarded moments. "While I value Mr. Whitfield's input," Jasmine added smoothly, "my analysis suggests his approach would substantially decrease service quality and employee retention, while providing only short-term financial gains at the expense of long-term value creation." The professional rebuke, delivered without overt reference to Blake's behavior or prejudice, demonstrated precisely the leadership quality the board was looking for, the ability to address opposition firmly, but without personalizing conflict. Board member Elizabeth Chen, who had initially seemed receptive to Blake's concerns, nodded appreciatively at Jasmine's response. "These projections are impressive, Ms. Carter. I particularly appreciate your focus on sustainable growth rather than quick-win asset reallocation." Blake, sensing the momentum shifting away from him, attempted to reassert control of the narrative. While these materials are certainly comprehensive, they don't address my fundamental concern about corporate governance during a health crisis. Victor's condition creates uncertainty that shareholders will find troubling. Actually, the board's legal counsel interjected, our governance structure explicitly provides for this scenario. The succession plan has been properly filed and approved by this board over a year ago. Ms. Carter's qualifications exceed all stated requirements for the CEO position. There is no governance issue here. Blake's strategy was unraveling rapidly, but he made one final attempt to salvage his position. Nevertheless, I believe it would be prudent to implement an oversight committee during the initial transition period, perhaps comprising several board members with relevant experience. Left unspoken was his expectation that he would chair such a committee. Victor, who had been observing the exchange from his hospital room, chose this moment to re-enter the conversation. Blake, your concern for Aero Elite's governance is touching, especially given what my daughter has shared about your expressed interest in our Asian routes and maintenance operations during yesterday's flight. The direct reference to his private conversations visibly unsettled Blake, who glanced nervously at Tristan beside him. In the interest of complete transparency, Victor continued, I feel the board should be aware of certain relevant facts before voting on today's succession plan. At this cue, Jasmine distributed another set of documents to the board members. These materials include audio recordings and witness statements from yesterday's flight, documenting Mr. Whitfield's explicit statements about using my father's health crisis to force a leadership vacuum, challenge my qualifications based on gender and race rather than merit, and ultimately position his investment group to acquire key Aero Elite assets at reduced valuations. The boardroom fell completely silent as members reviewed the transcripts of Blake's conversations with Tristan, his phone calls to associates, and his explicit statements about exploiting Victor's health situation for corporate advantage. Additionally, Jasmine continued, her voice steady despite the tension in the room, you'll find documentation of Mr. Whitfield's behavior toward me personally during the flight, including harassment based on race and gender, deliberate beverage, spills on my uniform, and inappropriate physical contact, all while believing I was just a flight attendant rather than his professional equal. Blake's face flushed with a combination of anger and embarrassment as his actions were exposed to the entire board. This is outrageous, he sputtered. Recording private conversations is perfectly legal on commercial aircraft, which explicitly advise passengers that they may be recorded for security purposes, the legal counsel interrupted smoothly. Furthermore, these weren't private conversations when conducted at volume in a public cabin after multiple alcoholic beverages. Board Chairman Foster studied the materials with a deepening frown. Mr. Whitfield, these transcripts suggest you were actively planning to use Victor's health situation to undermine the company's leadership succession for your own financial benefit. Is that accurate? These comments are taken completely out of context, Blake insisted, his composure cracking under the direct questioning. Tristan and I were simply discussing theoretical corporate governance scenarios, not plotting anything improper. Tristan, sensing the imminent collapse of their position, subtly distanced himself from Blake by shifting his chair slightly away, a movement not lost on the observant board members. Jasmine allowed the evidence to speak for itself, maintaining her professional demeanor throughout the uncomfortable confrontation. This wasn't about personal vindication. It was about protecting her father's company from predatory interests that would dismantle it for short-term gain. Victor spoke up from the video feed, his voice carrying the weight of his decades of leadership. Board members, you've known me for years. I built Aero Elite from 2 leased planes into an international carrier with 87 aircraft and 20,000 employees. Throughout that journey, I've always prioritized 3 things: exceptional service, dignified treatment of our people, and long-term value creation over short-term profits. He paused, allowing his words to resonate before continuing. My daughter Jasmine embodies those same values, as demonstrated by her willingness to work from the ground up, experiencing our company as both employees and customers do. Yesterday, she demonstrated extraordinary grace under pressure when faced with discrimination and harassment that would have broken many others. The boardroom remained silent, all eyes now on Jasmine, who maintained her composed professionalism despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I don't ask you to approve her as my successor because she's my daughter," Victor concluded. "I ask you to recognize that she has earned this position through qualification, preparation, and demonstration of the character needed to lead Aero Elite into its next chapter." Board Chairman Foster nodded slowly, then addressed the group. "I believe we've heard enough to proceed with our vote. The motion before the board is to approve Jasmine Carter as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately, with Victor Carter transitioning to Executive Chairman. All those in favor?" One by one, hands raised around the table. First Elizabeth, Chen, then Richard Jameson, followed by the remaining members until only Blake's hand remained down. "The motion carries with overwhelming approval," Foster announced formally. "Congratulations, CEO Carter." Jasmine accepted the role with gracious professionalism, thanking the board for their confidence and outlining her immediate priorities for the transition. Throughout her remarks, Blake sat in stunned silence, the full consequences of his behavior on yesterday's flight now painfully evident. When the formal business concluded, Foster addressed one final matter. "Given the documentation presented today regarding Mr. Whitfield's statements and behavior, I believe we need to consider his continued membership on this board." Blake finally found his voice, though it lacked his earlier confidence. "You can't remove me based on a few out-of-context comments and allegations from a biased source. Actually," the legal counsel corrected, "the board bylaws explicitly permit removal for conduct detrimental to the company's interests, which attempted corporate sabotage certainly qualifies as. However, I suspect Mr. Whitfield might prefer to resign voluntarily rather than face a formal removal vote and the public disclosure that would necessitate." The implicit threat was clear: resign quietly or face public exposure of his behavior and statements. Blake glanced around the table, finding no allies among the board members who had just reviewed evidence of his prejudice and predatory intentions. "This is a railroading," he protested weakly. "A setup from the beginning." "No, Blake," Jasmine replied evenly, speaking directly to him for the first time since the meeting began. "This is accountability. You showed your true character when you thought no one of consequence was watching. That's not a setup, it's revelation." The simple truth of her statement hung in the air between them, impossible to refute. Blake had behaved abominably towards someone he perceived as beneath him, never imagining she would hold his professional fate in her hands mere hours later. "I'll submit my resignation," he conceded finally, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "But this isn't over." "Actually, it is," Victor interjected from the screen. "Your resignation will include a non-disparagement agreement and a 5-year ban on acquiring Aero Elite stock or assets. Our legal team has the paperwork ready." The thoroughness of their preparation left Blake with no viable countermove. He had been outmaneuvered completely, his own behavior providing all the leverage needed to remove him from any position of influence over Aero Elite's future. As the meeting concluded and board members came forward to congratulate Jasmine, Blake and Tristan made a hasty exit, their plans for corporate takeover thoroughly dismantled by the very person they had dismissed and demeaned throughout yesterday's flight. Outside the boardroom, reporters had gathered for the scheduled announcement of Aero Elite's leadership transition. Jasmine stepped before the cameras with confidence, officially introducing herself as the company's new Chief Executive Officer. Aero Elite was founded on the principle that excellence in aviation isn't determined by background, race, or gender, but by commitment to exceptional service, innovation, and respect for both customers and employees, she stated in her opening remarks. "As CEO, I will ensure those values continue to guide every aspect of our operations." When a reporter asked about her unusual preparation for the role, Jasmine smiled. "For the past 18 months, I've had the privilege of serving as a flight attendant on our routes, experiencing our company from the perspective of both our dedicated staff and our valued customers. That experience will inform every decision I make as CEO." She didn't mention Blake Whitfield or yesterday's flight specifically, maintaining the high road even in victory. This moment wasn't about personal vindication, but about charting Aero Elite's future course. As the press conference concluded, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a message from her father. Couldn't be prouder. You handled that perfectly. Blake never knew what hit him. The climactic confrontation had unfolded exactly as justice demanded, not through emotional outbursts or personal attacks, but through methodical exposure of truth and character. Blake had been defeated not by Jasmine's power, but by his own actions, revealed in the harsh light of accountability. As she stepped away from the podium, Jasmine caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Sophia Martinez, the passenger who had shown her kindness and solidarity during yesterday's flight. "Congratulations, CEO Carter," Sophia said with a knowing smile. "Justice served indeed." "Thank you for your help," Jasmine replied sincerely. "Your recordings provided valuable documentation." "Happy to assist," Sophia responded. "Though I have to say, watching his face when he realized who you really were might have been worth the price of that first-class ticket all by itself." They shared a laugh, the tension of the past 24 hours finally releasing. The confrontation was complete, justice had been served, and Aero Elite's future was secure under leadership that understood the value of every person, regardless of position or title. Blake Whitfield had learned the hard way that character reveals itself in how you treat those you think can't help or hurt you. It was a lesson Jasmine would carry with her throughout her leadership journey, a reminder that true respect sees dignity in every role, from the boardroom to the airplane cabin, and everywhere in between. 1 month after the dramatic boardroom confrontation, Jasmine Carter stood at the podium in Aero Elite's largest hangar, addressing the assembled employees who had gathered for her first company-wide address as CEO. Behind her, a newly delivered Boeing 787 gleamed under the spotlights, its fuselage freshly painted with the company's distinctive blue and silver livery. "When my father founded this airline 34 years ago with 2 leased aircraft and a dream, people told him it couldn't be done," Jasmine began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "They said a black man couldn't build a luxury airline in an industry dominated by legacy carriers with generations of entrenchment." She paused, glancing toward the front row where Victor sat, now recovered enough to attend important company events, though still undergoing regular medical monitoring. But Victor Carter understood something fundamental about excellence. It isn't determined by background, race, or gender. Excellence comes from vision, determination, and the courage to see people for their true worth rather than superficial characteristics. The assembled employees nodded in agreement, many having experienced Victor's leadership philosophy firsthand throughout their careers. "During my 18 months working as a flight attendant among you, I learned more about this company than any executive briefing could ever teach me," Jasmine continued. "I experienced the challenges our cabin crew face daily, witnessed the dedication of our ground staff, and understood the passenger perspective in ways that will forever inform my leadership." In the week following her appointment, the story of Jasmine's undercover role in the confrontation with Blake Whitfield had leaked to the aviation industry press, creating a sensation that had significantly raised Aero Elite's public profile. The narrative of a qualified black woman facing discrimination while undercover, only to emerge as CEO the next day, had captured public imagination and turned into a powerful marketing asset. "Today, I'm proud to announce several initiatives that directly resulted from my time on the front lines," Jasmine announced. "First, our new Dignity First program, establishing industry-leading protections for our staff against passenger harassment and discrimination." The announcement drew enthusiastic applause, particularly from the flight attendants who had experienced similar situations to what Jasmine had endured on that fateful flight. Second, we're implementing an executive immersion requirement. Every vice president and director will now spend 1 week annually working frontline positions, experiencing our company from the ground up. This announcement elicited surprised murmurs, followed by appreciative nods throughout the audience. The prospect of executives actually understanding daily operational challenges represented a revolutionary approach to corporate leadership. Third, we're expanding our employee ownership program, ensuring that every Aero Elite team member directly benefits from the company's success through meaningful equity participation. The applause for this announcement was particularly enthusiastic, as financial inclusion resonated deeply with the workforce. And finally, Jasmine continued once the applause subsided, "I'm honored to introduce our newest aircraft, which we've named Second Chances. She gestured toward the gleaming 787 behind her. This name reflects our company's commitment to seeing beyond first impressions and recognizing the potential in everyone, both our employees and our customers. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone familiar with recent events. Jasmine had taken what could have been merely a personal vindication against Blake Whitfield and transformed it into a company-wide philosophy about dignity, respect, and recognizing, worth beyond superficial judgments. After the formal presentation concluded, Jasmine mingled with employees, listening to their ideas and concerns with genuine interest. Her approach demonstrated exactly what made her different from leaders like Blake. She valued input from all levels, recognizing that wisdom wasn't confined to the executive suite. Michael Dawson, her ally from her flight attendant days, approached with a broad smile. From serving drinks in first class to running the whole airline in 1 month. Not bad, CEO Carter. I couldn't have done it without allies like you, Jasmine replied sincerely. Though I still maintain my drink-pouring technique was always top-notch. Speaking of your service skills, Michael said, lowering his voice slightly. Have you heard? What happened with Blake Whitfield? Jasmine shook her head. Since the boardroom confrontation, she had deliberately avoided following Blake's subsequent career trajectory, focusing instead on Aero Elite's future, rather than personal vindication. His company's stock dropped 15% after word got out about his behavior on that flight, Michael explained. Apparently, major clients with diversity commitments started withdrawing their business. The board forced him to step down last week. The news didn't bring Jasmine the satisfaction some might have expected. That's unfortunate for his employees, she said thoughtfully. Though perhaps the company will find better leadership now. Always seeing the bigger picture, Michael observed with admiration. That's why you're up there, and the rest of us are down here. We're all on the same level, Michael, Jasmine corrected gently. Different roles, equal dignity. That's what this company stands for now more than ever. Later that afternoon, Jasmine visited her father in his office, which was in the process of being transitioned to her as he moved to a smaller space befitting his new executive chairman role. The speech was perfect, Jazzy, Victor said warmly. You're already a better CEO than I ever was. Different, not better, Jasmine corrected, echoing their conversation from the hospital. I'm building on the foundation you created. Victor nodded toward a framed news article on his wall, the aviation industry's coverage of Jasmine's appointment and the circumstances surrounding it. The headline read, Undercover Boss. How Aero Elite's new CEO experienced discrimination, firsthand before taking command. That flight with Blake was horrible for you, Victor acknowledged. But it gave you something valuable. Firsthand experience of what many of our employees face. That perspective will make you a more empathetic leader. It already has, Jasmine agreed. Every decision I make now comes with the question, how would this affect our frontline staff? How would it impact our passengers? Victor smiled proudly. That's exactly why you were always the right choice to lead this company forward. Their conversation was interrupted by Jasmine's assistant, who appeared at the door with an urgent expression. Ms. Carter, Sophia Martinez is here to see you. She says it's important. Jasmine looked surprised but nodded. Send her in. Sophia entered moments later, professionally dressed and carrying a leather portfolio. CEO Carter, Chairman Carter, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. After your help during that flight, you've earned the right to drop by anytime, Jasmine assured her. What brings you here today? An opportunity I thought might interest Aero Elite, Sophia explained, opening her portfolio. My tech company is launching a new corporate travel platform focused specifically on inclusive business practices. We're looking for an airline partner who demonstrates genuine commitment to diversity and dignity in their operations. Victor and Jasmine exchanged interested glances. Tell us more, Victor encouraged. The platform will direct corporate travel bookings preferentially toward companies with proven diversity commitments and ethical treatment standards, Sophia elaborated. After witnessing how Aero Elite's leadership handled the situation with Blake Whitfield, our board unanimously agreed you would be the ideal airline partner for our launch. The proposal represented exactly the kind of opportunity Jasmine had envisioned. Business growth rooted in ethical practices rather than exploitation. "We'd be very interested in exploring this partnership," she confirmed, as they discussed preliminary details. Jasmine reflected on how her journey had come full circle. What began as an undercover experiment to learn the business from the ground up had transformed into a powerful leadership philosophy that was now attracting like-minded partners and creating new business opportunities. Later that week, Jasmine presided over her first regular board meeting as CEO. The empty seat formerly occupied by Blake Whitfield had been filled by a respected aviation industry veteran who happened to be a woman of color, not as a diversity statement, but because her qualifications were impeccable and her values aligned with Aero Elite's renewed mission. "Our first quarter results since the leadership transition have exceeded projections by 17%, Jasmine reported to the appreciative board. "More importantly, our employee satisfaction metrics have reached an all-time high, and customer loyalty program enrollments have increased 23% since our story became public." The board members nodded approvingly, recognizing that the company's renewed commitment to dignity and inclusion was proving to be not just ethically sound, but also good business. The Blake Whitfield incident, while unfortunate, has become a powerful teaching moment throughout our organization, Jasmine continued. "We've incorporated it into our management training as a case study in how unconscious bias and discrimination can impact workplace culture." "Turning lemons into lemonade," Board Chairman Foster observed with approval. "Very effective leadership." CEO Carter. After the meeting concluded, Jasmine visited the airport to observe the departure of a transcontinental flight, the same route she had served on that fateful day with Blake Whitfield. As she watched the boarding process from an unobtrusive position, she noticed a young black woman in an Aero Elite flight attendant uniform efficiently managing the first-class cabin. The attendant handled a particularly demanding passenger with remarkable grace, maintaining her professionalism despite the customer's impatience. When the boarding completed and the aircraft door was about to close, Jasmine approached. "Excuse me," she said, extending her hand to the surprised flight attendant. "I'm Jasmine Carter." "Ms. Carter," the young woman exclaimed, clearly starstruck by the unexpected appearance of the CEO. "I'm Tanya Williams. It's an honor to meet you." "I was watching how you handled that challenging passenger in 4B, Jasmine said warmly. "That was impressive professionalism." Tanya beamed at the recognition. "Thank you. I actually used your story as inspiration during training. If the CEO could maintain her composure while being mistreated, I figured I could manage difficult situations too." The comment touched Jasmine deeply. Her experience had already transformed from a personal ordeal into an inspirational example for others facing similar challenges. "You're doing excellent work, Tanya," Jasmine said sincerely. "And you never know where this role might lead you. Someday." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate minutes later, Jasmine watched from the terminal window, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. What Blake Whitfield had intended as demeaning treatment had instead revealed character, his and hers, in ways that had transformed an entire company. The Boeing 787 lifted gracefully into the azure California sky, banking gently as it established its course eastward. Aboard were passengers from all backgrounds, served by a diverse crew who embodied Aero Elite's renewed commitment to seeing the true worth in every person. Jasmine's phone vibrated with a message from her father. "Just heard. Meridian Investments is being investigated for discriminatory practices following complaints from former employees. Blake's treatment of you wasn't isolated. Justice comes in many forms." She typed a simple reply. "We build while others fall. That's the difference between leadership and exploitation." As she walked back toward her waiting car, Jasmine passed a familiar face, the elderly gentleman who had spoken up during Blake's tirade on that difficult flight. He recognized her immediately. "CEO Carter," he said with a respectful nod. "Congratulations on your appointment. I'm flying Aero Elite exclusively now, after witnessing how you handled yourself on that New York flight. True character reveals itself in how we treat others when we think no one important is watching." "Thank you, sir," Jasmine replied, the simple wisdom of his observation resonating deeply. That's a philosophy we're building into every aspect of our company now. Good, he said with approval. The world needs more leaders who understand that dignity isn't determined by title or position, but by basic humanity. As Jasmine drove back to headquarters, she reflected on how a single flight, 6 hours of difficulty and discrimination, had crystallized her leadership philosophy more powerfully than any business school case study ever could. Blake Whitfield had seen a flight attendant dismissing her based on race and gender. Victor Carter had seen a future CEO, recognizing potential beyond superficial characteristics. Both men had been instrumental in shaping Aero Elite's future, though in dramatically different ways. The company's new tagline, unveiled just that morning, on their updated website, captured the lesson perfectly. Aero Elite Airways, where everyone flies first class in dignity. It wasn't just a marketing slogan, but a promise, one born from difficult experience and now embedded in every aspect of the company's operations. The story of the flight attendant who became CEO overnight had transformed from personal vindication into a corporate philosophy that would guide Aero Elite into its most successful era yet. In the end, Blake Whitfield had been right about one thing: appearance could indeed be deceiving. He just never expected to be on the wrong side of that deception, underestimating the woman serving his drinks while revealing his own character flaws in the process. For Jasmine Carter, CEO of Aero Elite Airways, that irony wasn't just satisfying. It was the foundation of a leadership approach that would change an entire industry for the better, one flight at a time. What would you do if you were in a situation like Jasmine's? Have you ever experienced discrimination and wished for such a perfect moment of justice? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this story of karma being served at 30,000 feet. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that justice sometimes comes when you least expect it. Thank you for watching, and remember, you never know who might be serving your drinks on your next flight. Jasmine's journey teaches us that true character reveals itself in how we treat people when we believe they have no power over us. Blake Whitfield exposed his prejudice and cruelty when interacting with someone he perceived as beneath him, never imagining she would hold his fate in her hands the very next day. This powerful reversal underscores how discrimination often stems from false assumptions about people's worth, based solely on their appearance or position. The story also highlights the value of strategic patience. Rather than revealing her identity, immediately when faced with discrimination, Jasmine gathered intelligence that ultimately protected her father's company and legacy. Her undercover experience provided first-hand knowledge of employee challenges that made her a more effective and empathetic leader. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative demonstrates that dignity isn't determined by title or position. Jasmine maintained her professionalism and composure despite horrible treatment, while Blake revealed his lack of character despite his expensive suit and executive title. True leadership stems from seeing the value in every person, regardless of their role. Finally, the story reminds us that justice often arrives in unexpected ways. What Blake intended as demeaning treatment instead became the catalyst for positive transformation throughout an entire company, proving that sometimes our greatest challenges can become our most powerful opportunities for growth and change. Have you ever been underestimated or faced discrimination like Jasmine did? Share your experience in the comments below and how you handled it. Would you have revealed your identity sooner, or do you think Jasmine's strategic patience was the perfect approach? Comment patience if you would have waited like she did, or reveal if you would have exposed yourself immediately to see Blake's reaction. Did you feel satisfied when Blake finally realized who Jasmine really was? That moment of perfect justice is why stories like this resonate so deeply with us all. If this tale of karma being served at 30,000 feet made you smile, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of people overcoming discrimination and prejudice with dignity and intelligence. We post new content every Wednesday and Sunday, and your subscription helps our community grow. Don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes justice arrives when we least expect it. Tag a friend who would love Jasmine's powerful story of transformation and vindication. Thank you for watching. Remember, you never know who the person serving you might really be. so treat everyone with the dignity and respect they deserve. Until next time, keep flying high above prejudice and discrimination.